1997 was a blast, but was 1998 great too? Well, it was a pretty darn good year. I mean, see for yourself. Caesar F.R.E.A.K.S is a third title in ancient Rome-themed series of city-building games, in which you must assume a role of no other than the governor of one of the provinces. As you go through the game, you'll be constructing cities of increasing size and complexity. So, with each next mission in the campaign, you'll have to build larger cities and complete series of different victory conditions, either peaceful or military. Peaceful ones pose a risk of earthquakes, fires and other natural hazards to your future metropolis, while the military can also challenge you with enemy invasions. The game is played on an isometric top-down view map and require you to erect buildings to please and fulfill your citizens' requests and requirements. Other than that, you'll need to manage several interconnected supply chains, ensuring cities' continuous growth, all the while making sure all the basic needs of food, water, religious services, entertainment, education and health services are met. Progress in Caesar F.R.E.A.K.S is evaluated against the population of a city and 4 stats of culture, prosperity, peace and favor. First is measured based on the number and coverage of the cultural buildings in the city, so temples, theaters and schools among others. Prosperity circles around employment rates, housing, quality and revenue. Peace is measured based on the damage caused by crime, riots and invasions. And finally, favor is based on how fast you complete requests sent to you by Caesar himself, and usually mean paying a tribute or sending him gifts. You know, how you would in these trying times. If at any given moment while playing you'll feel lost and confused like a child in the middle of a huge shopping center with no parents around, there are a series of advisors in the game who will help you with various aspects of the city life, and a chief advisor too, who summarizes critical issues and key informations of happenings in your city. In essence, everything in Caesar F.R.E.A.K.S is based on underlying systems and your citizens. So, each and every building requires someone to work in it, and then in turn, when he/she does, it usually requires other types of people to either distribute the produce or use it. In that aspect, Caesar F.R.E.A.K.S is more like Settlers than most other city building games. To summarize, Caesar F.R.E.A.K.S is a brilliant little game, and it's as fun today as it was when it released. Also, not that little, no idea why I said that. Despite the title's similarities, Gran Touring doesn't have much to do with Gran Turismo. It's an unlicensed circuit racing game featuring over 20 trucks and cars. So a pretty decent selection if I say so myself. It's a weird saying, you know? I often wondered why would anyone else say that they're saying something themselves. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? But who am I to question this? I know nothing of the history and genesis of sayings and are only semi-good talking about video games. Anyway, Gran Touring features 2 game modes. Arcade, which consists of single and checkpoint races, first being exactly what it sounds like, and second is driving checkpoint to checkpoint before the time runs out. You know, like you did in Outrun years earlier. The second game mode is so-called Simulator, and it's split into 3 sub-modes. Don't you just love overcomplicated menus? Championship, the main part of the game in which you practice and race on various tracks, all the while working to upgrade and keep your car repaired in tip-top shape to win races and climb the world rankings. The second one is Auto Test mode, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You jump in a car and can test it out on an obstacle course. Finally, multiplayer, which is, well, I mean, do I really have to explain? I don't think so. And up to 7 of you can race each other across LAN or serial connection. No split screen or internet racing though. The tracks, while based on the international Grand Prix ones, are unlicensed, so can't work under their original names and can be raced both in regular and mirror direction. There are also 12 different drivers, each with their own unique AI and driving behavior, and learning how they act during races will be a huge help in your career. Though it has to be said here that Gran Touring is not really a difficult game, so don't expect to be overly challenged like ever. Different weather conditions and time of the day are also included in the game, but I never noticed them making any real difference in driving. In fact, despite what it may seem, Gran Touring is much closer to arcade races like Daytona USA than simulations like the aforementioned Gran Turismo. Presentation-wise, the game is rather nice looking and sounding, and even if it was a budget release, it definitely didn't look like it. F.R.E.A.K.S, or Biological Flying Robotic Enhanced Armored Killing Synthoids, a stupid-ass name I must add, is a rather brutal and blood-by-the-bucket spilling 3D one-on-one versus fighter. And it's that brutality of attacks and also dangers in the interactive arenas filled with traps, chainsaws and lava pits and the likes what's most memorable and notable about it. But before we get into details, there is a story here. Yep, you guessed it, it's not great. But since it's a versus fighter, it doesn't have to be. So, in the far-off future, the America has fallen. Not to any other nation, external power or aliens, but under the rule of 9 mega corporations that strive for control and profit, effectively eliminating any real power that the government might have had in the past. To limit the profit losses caused by potential conflicts, violence and crime between them, they agreed to solve all their disputes in the deadly arenas using specially trained and bioengineered fighters. And these are broken down into three kinds of warriors, so-called synthoids that have no mechanical parts and were entirely bioengineered for combat, retros with weapons attached to their bodies, and finally dozers, which are entirely mechanical with an exception of their brains encased within the rock-hard shells of the bodies. Each of the characters have their own unique close and long-range weapons and a jetpack. Well, shield too, that protects from long-range attacks, but it's limited use, so it's always better to dodge than take those shots in. If possible, that is. So, being very brutal, with chopped off limbs and decapitations being nothing particularly special about each fight, and having a decent cast of characters and arenas, had to make F.R.E.A.K.S an instant hit, right? Well, it wasn't one of the most popular games in 1998, that's for sure. Blood and violence aside, F.R.E.A.K.S feels simplistic and banal as compared to giants of the genre like Virtua Fighter or Tekken. A lot of action happens from afar, with players shooting at each other, there's no combos, no reveals and even no throws in the game. And controls, for the lack of a better word, feel stiff and floaty at the same time. I never enjoyed F.R.E.A.K.S, but it doesn't mean that the others didn't. That said, I don't recall talking to anyone who would have played it, so it's highly probable that many people didn't even try it out. If you like versus fighters, there's definitely something in the game worth experiencing, especially if you're gonna test it out with someone else, but if you like me and only ever play this occasionally, then there's a lot much better games in the genre out there. DX Ball 2 is based on DX Ball 1, which in turn was based on Amiga's Mega Ball that was inspired by Breakout and Arkanoid. Oof, what a legacy. All these games were, nay, are amazing, and the idea behind gameplay is nearly as old as the gaming itself. So, each level is static and non-scrolling, with the paddle firmly placed at the bottom, only moving horizontally across the screen, and colorful bricks on top arranged in various intricate patterns. The paddle is used to bounce the ball that destroys the bricks above it, some of them take more than one hit to break, some are indestructible or invisible, and there are even these that are combustible. Destroyed bricks sometimes drop random power-ups that, when picked up, grant various game-changing bonuses, like enlargement or reduction of paddle size, fireball, multi-ball, paddle-mounted cannons, and others. When the screen is cleared and there's no more bricks left, you move to the next stage. But if the ball ever leaves the screen, passing through its bottom edge, you lose a life. Full version of the game was a huge step up from its predecessor, offering a considerable bump in presentation, with high-resolution fully textured bricks and backgrounds, high-quality special effects, well, at least for the time, real-time ray-traced balls, and a whopping 150 levels divided into 6 uniquely themed and designed board sets. Demo version only offered 24 of these, which may not seem like a lot in comparison, but in the same time, it's plenty enough to familiarize yourself with it and decide if it was something you'd like to pull the trigger on. DX Ball was the best Breakout/Arkanoid type of a game on Windows, until the release of DX Ball 2, which took the cake and is one of the best games in the genre to this very day. If the video and what I'm saying don't convince you, give it a go, it's not only worth it but also extremely addictive. The best way to experience DX Ball today is a semi-recent Steam re-release in the form of 20th Anniversary Edition. Especially that it had been facelifted a bit more, converted to work great on modern widescreen displays, and has additional level packs available for purchase too. Damage Incorporated is a Macintosh FPS based on the aging Marathon engine and ported to PC in 1998. You could say that Damage Incorporated was a protoplast of later and much better Rainbow Six games. So, you being the super turbo extra cool and skilled leader of the US anti-terrorist unit are tasked with leading 4-man teams around different missions, neutralizing number of various paramilitary groups. So, despite the title, you don't play Damage Incorporated like any other shooter, just running in, guns blazing against an overwhelming enemy forces, downing them left and right with no effort as if they were flies. But actually have to plan out your approach and how your teammates will move and react. Cause if you don't, you'll fail. Simple as that. Well, you won't cause you're you, but anyone else would. All that makes the game feel a bit more complex and strategic than any other run-of-the-mill shooter. Sadly, your teammates don't always follow your orders to the letter, which supposedly was a known issue. And while it's a bit troublesome, it also could be argued that it's more realistic too, simulating random on-the-spot behavior that the person is prone to if taken out of their comfort zone. So, under an unexpected fire or surrounded, when something happens you didn't expect or wasn't prepared for. The aforementioned Rainbow Six implemented team control much better, and their AI is in a league above the one in Damage Incorporated too. But that's something we'll discuss in detail when we get to it later on in the year. Cause yeah, Rainbow Six released in 1998 on Windows 2. All that said, Damage Incorporated is not a bad game, just a tad more chaotic than you'd expect from a squad-based tactical shooter, and not exceptional in anything it does. The graphics, while not very good, are also not off-putting, and the weapons and team members' banter are both fun and add flavor to this unusual shooter. If you like FPSs, there's no reason to skip it, but if you're not a fan, it's not a game that would sway you to change your mind about the genre. After incredible success and popularity of Warcraft 2, in 1998 Blizzard released Starcraft, a real-time strategy that, as we know now, crushed Warcraft with its popularity, became the title beloved world over, and was one of the cornerstones that sparked creation of the esports. In that all, whether you like RTSs or like me don't, it's without a shred of a doubt one of the most important titles in history of gaming. Both Starcraft and its expansion in the form of Brood War came out in 1998, so I will cover both of them at once. Because why the hell not? Anyway, the games are set in 26th century in space and cover the struggle for dominance between the four species. The adaptable and mobile Terrans, so us, the ever-evolving insectoid Zerg, which are responsible for coining of the term of Zerging, based on one of the tactics used by competitive Starcraft players, the powerful Protoss, and finally Xel-Naga, a so-called creator race that eons earlier genetically engineered and created both Zerg and Protoss. The story of both games is so complicated, and I shit you not here, that recalling it here in detail would be troublesome and require much more time than I am willing to give any particular title in this video. So it's best to watch it in the in-game cinematics and experience while playing. But to summarize it, the game starts days after the first Zerg attack on the human colonies and the consequential annihilation of said colony by Protoss, who wanted to cleanse it of infected by Zerg humans, taking no risk in leaving anyone alive behind. All that sparked fears and turbulence among Terrans, which led to political turmoil and eventually power shift within the faction. That's how the game begins. And if that sounds like it's full of plot holes and it's rather unclear, then like I said, you gotta see it to learn it. Anyway, for the most part, Starcraft and Brood War are your typical combat-centric RTSs. So while you still have the credits and power source to build units and erect buildings, the focus definitely is placed on combat and using all beautifully balanced nations against each other. Each of the races have their strong and weak points, but to simplify, it could be brought down to Zerg being the quickest to build, Terrans the cheapest and Protoss the most powerful. And Xel-Naga, if you wonder, are not playable and only ever present in the background story parts of the game. If you're a fan of RTSs, then you know of Starcraft already and didn't need me to tell you about it at all. If you're not, then this may be the game to spark your interest, as it's truly outstanding and exceptional. While F.R.E.A.K.S was not great, Last Bronx is actually pretty darn good, even if not exceptional. It's Sega's own port of their arcade title, and as such it shared a lot with their Virtua Fighter series of games, in terms of tech and gameplay formula that is. So it's a full 3D versus fighter, pitting 9 different and unique fighters against each other in the most important fight of their lives. What a cliffhanger! But what is it all about? Cause I can't leave you like that with no details about it. Well, despite the title, Last Bronx does not take place in New York, but is in fact set in post-Japanese bubble alternate version of Tokyo, where disillusioned and out-of-work youth, not seeing their future in bright colors and having no support system or securities from the government, resort to joining crime families. After ceasefire between the gangs was broken by an unforeseen killing of a leader of one of the families, however, a mysterious group sent a message to all of them demanding a fair tournament between the leaders of all families to decide which will be the one to rule over the others, and effectively become the one controlling all of Tokyo. The message leaves no space for interpretation, and the presence in the tournament is mandatory. And hence, the Last Bronx, so the second All Tokyo Street War tournament begins. Silly name, but a decent game. Fights takes place in locations all around Tokyo, and all 9 fighters are unique not only how they look, but also their genesis, weapons that they use and fighting styles, making for a very fun and enjoyable romp. Especially if you're playing against someone else and not the CPU. Unlike Virtua Fighter 2, Last Bronx allows for use of taunts, and combinations of punch, kick and block buttons with directional controls are used for special attacks, throws and rolls. While Last Bronx on PC was nearly arcade perfect and much better than Saturn's original port, unlike its earlier brethren of Virtua Fighter 2, it did not support direct 3D and 3D acceleration cards, which means that huge chunk of potential player base was alienated by that design choice, not having powerful enough systems to run it fluidly. As entirely running software, Last Bronx required a hella capable CPU. and even high-end ones of the time couldn't always guarantee a constant 60 FPS gameplay. Arguably, the game's best played today, as its earlier requirements are largely a joke now, and even the potatoest of potatoes could run it at full speed in 2024. Dune 2000 is a partial reimagination of Westwood's earlier classic Dune 2, enhanced to run on modern at the time Windows systems and based on Frank Herbert's famous book Dune. The game is set on a titular planet and depicts a conflict between three large opposing royal houses of the Artrids, Ordos and Harkonnen. They compete for control and extraction of spice melange, a very rare and incredibly important in interstellar travel resource that is only found on the planet Dune. The spice is sold for the in-game currency of Solaris, which then in turn is used to erect buildings and purchase units. One of the changes to the original RTS is that you can finally control more than one unit at the time, a pet peeve of mine which made me despise the original title. Additionally, buildings set on concrete foundations do not deteriorate in Dune 2000, which perhaps was not a necessary change, but a very welcome one indeed. While all three houses differ in their in-lore genesis, most of the units that they have are identical. Some, however, like the Artrids Sonic Tanks, Ordos Deviators, and Harkonnen Devastators among others, are uniquely looking and operating ones, only available to their governing families. That said, capturing as opposed to destroying of competing houses' buildings that produces specialized units allows you a control of it too, so that if required can too be a part of your winning strategy. While arguably Dune 2000 is the best version of Dune 2 to play, it is also a rather disappointing release, as other than the few small quality of life changes, it was not raised to the 1998's presentation standard and added very little to the by then rather basic and old original's gameplay formula. Upon its release, many better RTSs were on the market, even prior year alone spawned what felt like ungodly number of these, each next better than the previous. Dune 2000 is a good game, if you're looking for a 1992 experience. But if you want to play an interesting and creative game in a genre, by the time of its release, there were considerably more enticing choices everywhere. Oh, I've made some enemies with that sentence. While not really my cup of tea, coffee, coke or whiskey, Warbirds is definitely most unique title in one aspect out of all games in today's video. It's a World War II era fighters, bombers and dive bombers combat simulation taking place on mock and historically accurate battlefields and only ever playable online, meaning that it offered no single player campaign or even experience of any kind other than the duel practice. If you wanted to play it, you had to do it online against real life players. There were 4 factions in each game, red, green, gold and purple, and after picking one you were instantly dropped in the middle of it all. So you'll fly in one of 50 entirely different and real-life era appropriate planes against the other teams in all-out combat encounters. There's no posing, no running to the bathroom quick, and no dinner breaks. If you're in the air, you gotta be at the steering stick fighting for your side. One notable quality of Warbirds worth mentioning here is the realism. Not only each and every plane had their own stats of speed, weight and maneuverability, but they're as close to real life as possible, including effects like engine stall and high-G maneuver readouts. I know that it's blackouts technically speaking, but if you ever had one in real life, they feel more rad, at least to me. Interestingly enough, the game was available entirely free for 5 hours of playtime, after which you had to cough up for either silver, gold or platinum subscription plans, giving you 5, 13 and 20 hours of gameplay included per month respectively, after which each additional hour would cost $2, a rather steep pricing today and even more so in 1998. Especially that Warbirds is one of those games that require 3 things for a player to succeed and become the air combat ace, and these are practice, practice, and you guessed it right, practice. That said, the experience was supposedly worth the price, as avid fans of the game would tell you. I have to take their word for it, as I've never played Warbirds. It was just not something I was into back then anymore, and definitely not in the subscription format. Incoming the final conflict was the bomb, and I loved it. It ran great on my TNT2 M64 too, which was not something that could be said about most demanding AAA games. So it was definitely a treat and a title I genuinely enjoyed getting lost in. It took place in the dark future of 2009 when Earth was invaded by the alien forces. You know, I sometimes wondered why would aliens in pop culture and media always attack after finding us? I mean, hasn't Star Trek taught us that despite all, peaceful coexistence is and always will be, in the long run, more profitable choice? At least in terms of progress, quality of life and happiness. Sadly, all I ever could come up with was a theory that all aliens had to be future humans sharing the same faults we have ingrained in us from birth. So hunger for power and control of the riches being monetary or in natural exploitable resources. And since they came to us, and we can barely reach them moon today in 2024 and done it last time in Minecraft over 50 years ago, I believe, they clearly have a considerable technological advantage and want to put it to action as fast as possible, not giving us a chance to catch up. Makes sense. In War and Conquest, after all, you want to use all your assets as optimally as possible, inducing minimal losses too. Anyway, cause I'm as usual lost in my crazy furies, not focusing on what I was supposed to talk about, in incoming, aliens are, well, incoming. They've already destroyed our moon base and the invasion of Earth is steadily progressing from the Arctic. So, you'll be tasked with defeating their offensive using various arsenal at our hands, so turrets, tanks, helicopters, jets, and in time even captured alien fighters, on battlefields all around the world. And as the story progresses, you'll even take the fight to the moon to recapture it. And yes, I know you will, cause you're you, so the biggest bump that there ever was, and bookcase example of a tough guy. A true and only unstoppable force of nature in our arsenal. The variety of vehicles and kinds of missions, coupled with simple but engaging story and most of all hella playable gameplay loop, ensured Incoming's popularity. And believe it or not, the non-stop action approach proves a timeless formula for success, and Incoming the final conflict is as fun today as it was in 1998. First of all, I'd like to apologize for how I sounded today. I'm a little bit hangover and I realized that I'm not 100%. But how did you find the beginning of 1998? Fun, right? Since there is more to come, make sure to hang around and keep your eyes open for another episode not to miss it. Also, let me know how you find today's games. I'm curious to know what you think. So, make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retrocentric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.